As I've argued in other videos, Night in the Woods is a game that is very much open to interpretation. If you want to believe that the Glimmer is a real thing, and that May really can astral project to other realms or worlds, then go on ahead. If you're of the opinion that it's all one big metaphor, and think that the black goat and everything we see in her dreams is just in her imagination, then knock yourself out. Anytime you have a work that is interpretable to this extent, it's important to have characters and story beats that straddle that fine line between the opposing points of view, and force the audience to reconsider their opinion on what's really going on. In Night in the Woods, a major example of characters that occupy this unique and delicate space are the bizarre and hilarious trio known as the Thryy Wyrd Tyyns. A group of wannabe soothsayers, the teens gesture towards the supernatural one minute, then ground us in reality the next, while also sending players on the trickiest side quest in the game. But before I go on, if you are a Night in the Woods fan, then please be sure to like, subscribe, and consider supporting me with a YouTube channel membership or over on Patreon. My dream is to make these videos full-time someday, and by doing any of those things, you'll be helping make that dream a reality. May can meet the teens for the first time on day 7, the same day as Harfest. She'll find them in the church region of the map, past Bruce's campsite. Though they never tell us their names, the game files list them as Britt, Carla, and Pam. And by May's estimation, they're about 14 years old. They start things off by saying some weird, cryptic shit to May, trying to sound mysterious as they reference the journey that brought her here. Some of it applies, but a lot of what we see with the teens is the typical stuff we see from fortune tellers. Vague statements that just manage to hit the mark when you stretch things far enough, or a broken clock being right twice a day, as they say. This continues with their first real question to her. Speaking in turns, they ask May which of the following things she's seen: a shipwreck, a ghost on a hill, or an arrow broken. Well, an arrow broken, as they insist on calling it. The correct answer is a shipwreck. May saw one on her way into town on her first night back, as she passed through the playground. If May answers correctly, it will obviously give her a more positive opinion on the potential clairvoyance of the teens than if she gets it wrong. Then they start to talk to her about God, asking if she views him as caring but absent, uncaring but distant, or vicious and roaming. I've seen this particular bit of dialogue interpreted a number of different ways, but my favorite might be the one I found here, in this rather old Reddit post, which likens the question to some of the debatably supernatural beings May encounters during the game. The janitor is caring but absent, the sky cat, or the ass cat, is uncaring but distant, and the black goat is vicious but roaming. Major credit to Reddit user Jaen for pointing this out, because that makes a lot of sense to me. I'm not sure how the teens respond to each of May's options, but if you say uncaring but distant, which aligns with the sky cat, as I did here, they'll describe a distant shore beneath the stars, which sounds just like the place where May meets the sky cat. So regardless of whether or not the teens are actually soothsayers, if this comment changes depending on May's response, it sure seems like Jaen might be onto something here. After some comical dialogue about tacos, the teens tell May to be on the lookout for 3 pentagrams in the coming days. This kicks off what is one of the most notoriously tricky side quests in the game. Finding them isn't all that complicated in and of itself, but for whatever reason, the game doesn't always recognize your discovery of them. In the 10+ times I've played Night in the Woods, I probably only managed to trigger the achievement and the corresponding journal page in roughly half of those playthroughs. But for posterity, if you're looking for the pentagrams yourself, you can find them in the following locations. On this poster, in the room where the new version of the Deep Hollow Hollowers play. The second pentagram's location changes depending on your decisions. If you're on Greg's path, order Doom Nuts during the final hangout at Donut Wolf on day 10, and you'll find a pentagram on one of the donuts. Pick it up, and it should go into your journal. If you're on B's path, during the final hangout at the college party on day 10, you'll get it when May does the secret handshake with Bombshell. As for the final one, you're guaranteed to get it. You'll find it on day 12, during the climax. It's a bit hard to spot, but it's right here, amongst the fallen beams and scaffolding behind the cult's church area down in the mines. You could make the argument that it's an intentional part of the design. Pentagrams are associated with Baphomet, a noted occult figure, who just so happens to be a goat. But it looks accidental to me, like the planks just happen to fall that way. So I wouldn't read into it too much, and you can take this as a rare moment where the king of overanalysis actually isn't convinced there's much of a deeper meaning here. We'll talk more about the pentagrams in a minute, but for some players, this meeting at Harfest where they give May this side quest will be the last time they'll see the teens until the epilogue. But folks who visit the graveyard with B during the ghost hunting portion of the game will encounter them towards the end of that segment, before they reach Little Joe's final resting place. There, they'll find the teens perched in front of the front gate that leads to Joe's headstone. You know, just hanging out in a graveyard, gatekeeping the casuals, like goth kids do. In a bit of a Sphinx-like manner, they'll refuse to let May and B pass unless they answer some questions. The nature of these inquiries are a bit uncomfortable, and definitely intrusive, but they do provide some enlightening background information on the two former friends. They ask May and B if they've done the no pants dance. May says she has, but then admits that she was just lying, while B tells a funny story about losing her virginity at math camp, of all places. They're then asked about their idea of a perfect date, which gives May an opportunity to talk about wrestling, something I'd have loved to have seen them explore in Night in the Woods too. Nightmare Eyes just sounds like a great name for an amateur pro wrestler, if you ask me. For their final question, the teens ask May and B to share their most embarrassing moment. B keeps it simple and tells a story about a time she farted in front of the class, while May recites one of 3 wild stories from her past, either from middle school, high school, or college. I'm not sure what she says in the other 2, but for college, it's a butchered attempt at flirting that would indeed be pretty humiliating for just about anyone. Amused by the story, the teens let the dynamic duo pass. May's final meeting with the teens takes place during the epilogue. She'll find them in exactly the same place they were on day 7, out past the church. She can tell them that they were right about the pentagrams, and that their predictions ended up being true. But for the most part, they express a lot of disinterest in their potential clairvoyance, and May in general. They'll comment about how perhaps they're just covering their tracks, but it comes off like they're just joking if you ask me. May then encourages them to stay weird, and with that, she departs. Before we get into my overall thoughts on the teens, let's talk about some of the imagery at play here. 3 weird women saying cryptic shit and taunting a protagonist with hints about what's to come is about as classic as it gets. It calls to mind the witches from Macbeth and the fates from Greek mythology. In fact, in modern retellings of the Scottish play, the witches are often just a trio of creepy teenagers. So, by connecting the teens to such a storied cultural reference point from the very beginning, a reference point that was typically taken seriously in other narratives, the developers set us up to do the same with the teens. Which is a really brilliant way to handle them. Because as I've noted throughout this video, the teens go from dropping incredibly prescient prophecy one minute to sarcasm and awkward questions the next. It allows the developers to play in the margins, to hint towards the game's magic realism elements and the possibility that all the stuff is just in May's head in the course of the same conversation. As I see it, the teens are just a trio of goth kids who happen to get a few things right thanks to the vagueness of their predictions. But I'll be interested to hear if you guys have a different interpretation. So if you do, let me know down in the comments. But Night in the Woods really does thrive on this dichotomy, the delicate balance between the two potential interpretations of the game. The teens are a key cog in that narrative wheel, and that's what makes them so important to Night in the Woods. Thanks for watching. Big thanks to Wolf.Godwin and Jordi Jaen Moreno for providing the music for these videos and the art for my channel. Huge shout out to James Pruitt, Corey Matson, Gustavo Balabi, Lil Caesar, Reed, and Pathonian, who get early access to these videos thanks to donations of $5 to $10 a month. See you guys next time.